tanks are warning that the UK's National Health Service is in a critical condition as it marks its 75th birthday. They blame and have pointed out that short-term thinking and underinvestment for the bleak future the NHS faces. Let's get more now from our UK correspondent Julia Chapman, who joins us for more on that developing story. Now, Julia, I remember during the COVID pandemic, a lot of questions being asked about this NHS that really saved the United Kingdom from the worst of that pandemic, and a spotlight being put on how it was being underfunded and yet could do the amazing work it did during that crisis time. And here we stand at its 75th birthday, and many in the UK questioning whether it will get to mark 100 years without major changes being made to the system.
That's right. A lot of reflection on this anniversary of Britain's health system. Lots of issues, of course, have been raised in recent months, in recent years. The country is currently experiencing a record high wait list. 7.4 million people in the UK are currently waiting for a medical procedure, and the health minister admitted today that that number was likely to go up before it goes down. There, of course, are many issues around the world that are common in health systems from country to country. But we are hearing accusations today from major health think tanks looking at the state of the system on its birthday and saying that chronic underfunding is having an impact, and that if that isn't rectified, there will inevitably be a period of managed decline where the system simply cannot deliver all of the things that it sets out to do. This is a health system that is meant to be free at the point of care. It is paid for through a system of general taxation, so it's not, and no one would ever be turned away for medical help if required. But inevitably, it is certainly suffering under the pressure. There are too many vacancies for doctors and nurses. People are waiting a very long time for their procedures, and lots of concern as well, as many healthcare workers have been going on strike. Next week, we're expecting both junior doctors and more experienced senior doctors to walk out and take to the picket lines.
Now, from health to education, that's really facing its own kind of crisis coming up potentially in September, with some schools in England potentially forcing to close if thousands of teachers go ahead with a strike that they are threatening. I've read that there are 4 unions that look like they're putting together a united front, and all aimed at Rishi Sunak's threats to overrule the results of an independent pay review body. It really seems to have been the last straw for these unions.
Certainly, we are seeing more likely strike action. Indeed, teachers in one union are on strike today, and some schools have been forced to close, but they are looking at some sort of coordinated action between the different teaching unions in an effort to put more pressure on Rishi Sunak's government and bring him back to the negotiating table for a pay rise. Of course, we've seen strikes in many different industries. I just mentioned healthcare as well. We've seen train drivers over the past few months going on strike. Many people negotiating for better pay at a period of very high inflation, and teachers saying that they are suffering in particular because they all have relatively low wages. They rejected a pay offer that the government put forward of 4.5% for next year and a £1,000 one-off payment for this year, saying that doesn't go far enough. And now the threat from the government to overrule the pay review body that is recommending pay rises for the public sector. That has certainly led to a lot of anger. Teachers now across the unions are being balloted for more extensive strike action when students come back to school in the autumn.
And finally, before I let you go, I put on the international news and I heard them singing God Save the King in Scotland, which you don't often hear, but King Charles being presented with the Scottish crown jewels today. How was he received in Edinburgh?
It was certainly a mixed reaction. This was the so-called Scottish Coronation, an event where King Charles and Queen Camilla received these jewels in Scotland. It's a ceremony of thanksgiving and dedication. There were several hundred public service individuals marching through the streets of Edinburgh ahead of this ceremony that took place in St Giles Cathedral in that major Scottish city. But there were also protests. In Scotland, the reception for the royal family is much more mixed than it is here in England. Not everybody wants to see the monarchy continue, particularly now with King Charles having been crowned after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who was very popular even in Scotland. She died in Scotland, of course, at her home in Balmoral. So there were some boos being heard in the streets of Edinburgh, alongside cheers, of course. The police had to put aside dedicated protesting areas in anticipation of some unrest, although it was relatively calm, certainly people making their opinions known, but it was all done fairly respectfully on this occasion.
Well, that's a wrap of all the major news talking points out of the UK. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Our UK correspondent, Julia Chapman.